The ice dam hanging off my neighbor's roof had grown so large that it looked like a frozen waterfall suspended in time. And I knew exactly whose problem Patricia from the HOA was about to make it. I had just finished salting my own driveway that February morning in Rochester, Minnesota, when I saw her marching up the sidewalk with that familiar clipboard clutched against her puffy winter coat. The temperature had been hovering around 15 degrees for the past 2 weeks, and the entire neighborhood looked like something out of a winter hellscape. Icicles the size of baseball bats hung from every gutter. Snow was piled 4 feet high on either side of the roads, and everyone with half a brain was staying inside as much as possible. Everyone except Patricia Whitmore, apparently. Isaac Johnson. She called out, her voice cutting through the frigid air like a knife. "I need to speak with you immediately." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, watching the vapor materialize in front of my face. I had lived in this subdivision for 3 years now, and in that time, Patricia had made it her personal mission to make my life as difficult as possible. The paint color on my shutters was half a shade too dark. My mailbox was positioned 2 inches too far to the left. My grass was 1/8 of an inch too tall in summer. The complaints never ended. "Morning, Patricia," I said, forcing something resembling a smile. "What can I do for you?" She stopped in front of me, her cheeks already red from the cold. She was probably in her mid-50s, with the kind of haircut that screamed, "Let me speak to your manager," and glasses that sat perched on her nose like she was perpetually judging everything she saw. Which, to be fair, she probably was. "Have you looked at your roof lately?" She demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. "My roof is fine," I said. "I cleared the gutters 2 days ago." "Well, the association building's roof is not fine," she snapped. "Neither is the community clubhouse. The ice dams are getting out of control, and as per your HOA agreement, Section 12, Paragraph 4, all homeowners are required to assist with the maintenance of common areas during emergency situations." I stared at her. "You want me to clear the ice from the HOA buildings?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. The ice needs to be removed before it causes damage. We've already had reports of water seeping into the clubhouse attic." "Then hire someone," I said flatly. "That's what HOA fees are for." Patricia's nostrils flared. "Our winter maintenance budget has been allocated elsewhere. Besides, this is a community, Isaac. We all need to pitch in." "Allocated elsewhere," I repeated. "You mean the new fountain you insisted on installing in front of the entrance, the one that won't even run for another 3 months?" "That fountain increases property values for everyone," she said defensively. "And I don't appreciate your tone. This is a requirement, not a request. If you refuse to help maintain the common areas, you'll be fined $500 per day until the work is completed." My jaw clenched. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. I've already spoken with the board, and they agree this constitutes an emergency situation requiring homeowner assistance." She thrust a paper at me. "Here's the official notice. You have until tomorrow at noon to begin clearing the ice from the association building and clubhouse gutters. Failure to comply will result in daily fines as stated." I took the paper, reading through the ridiculous demand. Sure enough, there it was in black and white, complete with the board's signatures. Patricia had somehow convinced them that this was a legitimate requirement under our HOA covenants. "This is insane," I muttered. "It's dangerous work. I'm not a professional. What if I fall? What if I get hurt?" "Then be careful," Patricia said coldly. "Or pay the fines. Your choice." She turned on her heel and marched back down the sidewalk, leaving me standing there in the freezing cold with a piece of paper that might as well have been a declaration of war. I went inside and immediately pulled out my HOA documents. I spent the next 2 hours reading through every clause, every paragraph, every footnote. The agreement did technically include language about homeowners assisting with emergency maintenance of common areas, but it was vague and clearly never intended to force residents to do dangerous work like clearing ice dams from roofs. I called my buddy Marcus, who worked as a property lawyer downtown. After explaining the situation, he was quiet for a long moment. Technically, they might have a leg to stand on, he finally said. The language is broad enough that they could argue ice dam removal falls under emergency maintenance. But Isaac, that doesn't mean you should do it. That's dangerous work. People die from falls every winter doing exactly what she's asking you to do. So what are my options? You could refuse and fight the fines in court, but that'll take time and money. You could comply and risk injury. Or, he paused, you could comply in a very specific way. She said you need to clear the ice from the gutters, right? Yeah. She didn't say you had to do it in any particular manner, and she didn't say you couldn't prioritize your own safety and property first. I could hear the hint of something in his voice. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that if this is truly an emergency that requires homeowner assistance, then you should probably make sure your own property is completely secure before moving on to the common areas. Take your time. Be thorough. Document everything. And if something happens to the HOA buildings before you get to them, well, you were working as quickly and safely as possible. A slow smile spread across my face. Marcus, you're a devious genius. I'm a lawyer, he said. It comes with the territory. Just make sure you document everything. Take photos, keep records of your time, save all communications. If this goes south, you'll want a paper trail. After hanging up, I spent the rest of the evening formulating my plan. If Patricia wanted me to clear ice from gutters, that's exactly what I would do. Starting with my own house and taking as much time as necessary to do it safely and thoroughly. The next morning, I woke up early and got to work. I set up my ladder against my house and began the careful process of removing the ice buildup from my gutters. I took my time, chipping away at the ice with a roof rake and a small mallet, making sure to document each step with photos on my phone. The temperature was still hovering in the teens, and the work was miserable. Around 10 in the morning, Patricia's car pulled up in front of my house. She got out and stared up at me on the ladder. "What are you doing?" she called up. "You're supposed to be working on the association building." "I'm clearing ice from gutters," I called back down, "just like you asked. From your gutters, not the community gutters." I climbed down the ladder carefully. Patricia, Section 12, Paragraph 4 says homeowners must assist with common area maintenance during emergencies. It doesn't say I can't take care of my own property first. In fact, I'd argue that making sure my own home is secure before helping with other buildings is the responsible thing to do. Her face was turning an impressive shade of red. "That's not what I meant, and you know it." "What you meant and what you wrote in the official notice are two different things," I said calmly. "I'm complying with your demand to the letter. I'm clearing ice from gutters. I'm just doing it systematically and safely, starting with my own property. This is unacceptable. I'll have the board issue another fine." "For what?" "Following your instructions." "Good luck with that." I picked up my phone and made a show of checking the time. "It's 10:15. I've been working since 7 this morning. That's over 3 hours of labor I'm donating to this emergency." "I think that's pretty generous, don't you?" Patricia sputtered for a moment, unable to find words. Finally, she jabbed a finger at me. "You're doing this on purpose." "I'm doing exactly what you demanded I do. If you wanted something specific, you should have been more specific in your notice." I climbed back up the ladder. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. These gutters aren't going to clear themselves." She stood there for another minute, clearly trying to think of some response that would put me in my place. When nothing came to her, she got back in her car and peeled out, tires spinning slightly on the ice-packed road. I continued working on my gutters for the rest of the day. It was genuinely hard work. The ice was thick and stubborn, and removing it without damaging the gutters or the roof required patience and care. By the time the sun started to set around 5:30, I had completed about half of my house. That evening, I wrote up a detailed report of my work for the day, including the hours spent, the methods used, and the progress made. I attached all the photos I had taken and emailed it to Patricia and the entire HOA board. The response came within 20 minutes. It was from Patricia, and it was even more aggressive than I had expected. "Your deliberate delay in addressing the common area maintenance is unacceptable and represents a clear violation of the emergency maintenance clause. You are hereby fined $500 for failure to comply with the board's directive. Work on the association building and clubhouse must begin immediately tomorrow morning or additional fines will be assessed." I forwarded the email to Marcus, who called me within minutes. "She's overreaching," he said immediately. "You're documenting that you're performing the work she demanded. She can't fine you for doing it in a particular order, especially when you're prioritizing safety. Don't pay that fine. In fact, write back and formally dispute it. I'll help you draft the response." We spent the next hour crafting a carefully worded email that pointed out exactly why the fine was inappropriate and legally questionable. I sent it off to the board with Marcus's law firm copied on it, making it clear that I had legal representation monitoring the situation. The next day was Saturday, and I continued working on my gutters. The temperature had risen slightly to the low 20s, which somehow made the work even more miserable because the ice was just warm enough to be slippery, but not warm enough to melt. I could see the association building from my house, about 200 yards away. The ice dams on that roof had grown even larger, and I noticed water staining on the siding below one section of gutter. Patricia drove by 3 times during the morning, each time slowing down to glare at me but not stopping. By afternoon, I had finished my entire house. The gutters were clear, the ice dams were removed, and my roof was in perfect condition. I documented everything thoroughly and sent another report to the board. Sunday morning, I woke up to the sound of cracking ice. I looked out my window and saw something that made me scramble for my camera. The massive ice dam on the north side of the association building had finally grown too heavy for the gutter to support. As I watched, the entire section of gutter tore away from the building with a metallic shriek, taking chunks of the fascia board with it. The ice and twisted metal crashed down onto the landscaping below, crushing several decorative bushes that Patricia had insisted the HOA spend $3,000 on last fall. I took photos and videos of everything, making sure to capture the damage from multiple angles. Then I got dressed and went outside to inspect my own property. My roof and gutters were perfect. Not a single ice dam, not a single problem. I took more photos documenting this. Around 9 in the morning, Patricia's car came screeching into the neighborhood. She must have gotten a call from someone about the damage. I watched from my window as she got out of her car and stared in horror at the destroyed gutter and damaged building. She pulled out her phone, made several animated calls, then looked directly at my house. 5 minutes later, she was pounding on my door. I opened it with a cup of coffee in my hand. "Morning, Patricia." "You," she shouted, her face purple with rage. "You did this. You let this happen on purpose." "I'm sorry," I said calmly. "What exactly did I do?" You knew those gutters needed to be cleared. You deliberately took your time with your own house so that the association building would be damaged. Actually, I followed your instructions exactly, I said. You demanded that I clear ice from gutters during this emergency. I did that. I spent the entire past 2 days clearing ice from gutters. The fact that I prioritized my own property first is just common sense and good practice. You were supposed to do the common areas. That was the entire point. That may have been your intent, but that's not what your written notice said. And honestly, Patricia, are you seriously suggesting that I should have risked my safety and potentially let my own home be damaged to take care of HOA property first? What kind of sense does that make? I'm fining you for the entire cost of the repairs, she screamed. The gutter, the fascia, the bushes, all of it. This is your fault. Actually, it's the HOA's fault for not hiring professionals to handle winter maintenance properly, I said. I'm a homeowner, not a building maintenance contractor. I have no professional obligation or qualification to service HOA property. In fact, now that I think about it, asking me to do that work might actually violate several liability and insurance regulations. I could see the moment doubt crept into her expression. I pressed my advantage. I complied with your demand to assist with emergency maintenance. I cleared gutters. I spent 2 full days doing exactly what you asked. If the HOA buildings were damaged because proper professional maintenance wasn't performed in a timely manner, that's a failure of the HOA board's responsibility to maintain common property using the fees we all pay for exactly that purpose. You can't pass that liability on to me. The board will hear about this, she sputtered. Good. Make sure you mention that you attempted to force an unqualified homeowner to perform dangerous roof work on HOA property instead of hiring licensed and insured professionals. I'm sure they'll be thrilled to learn about the potential liability issues you've created. Patricia opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, then turned and stormed off my porch. I closed the door and let out a long breath. My hands were shaking slightly from the adrenaline, but I felt good. I had played this exactly right. Over the next few days, things escalated quickly. The HOA held an emergency board meeting, which I attended via Zoom link as was my right. Patricia presented her case, painting me as a selfish homeowner who had deliberately sabotaged common property. When it was my turn to speak, I calmly presented all my documentation, the photos showing my gutters before and after, the detailed time logs of my work, the email correspondence. Marcus joined the call as my legal counsel and pointed out the multiple issues with Patricia's demands and the subsequent fines. The board members looked increasingly uncomfortable as the meeting went on. One of them, a retired accountant named Donald Pritchard, finally spoke up. Patricia, did you actually get estimates from professional contractors before issuing this demand to Mr. Johnson? Patricia shifted in her seat. The quotes we received were too expensive. $3,000 just for the association building alone. And how much did we spend on that fountain? Donald asked pointedly. That's different. That was a planned improvement that adds value. It's a fountain that doesn't run in winter, which is when we apparently needed money for actual maintenance, Donald said dryly. He turned to his camera. Mr. Johnson, I apologize for this situation. The board will be reviewing our winter maintenance policies and the appropriateness of the demands that were made. As for the fines, I'm moving to void them immediately. The board shouldn't be asking homeowners to perform dangerous maintenance work on common property. 2 other board members immediately seconded the motion. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but she was outvoted 4-1. The fines were voided, and I was officially cleared of any responsibility for the gutter damage. But Patricia wasn't done. 2 weeks later, I received another notice. This time, it claimed that my property was causing water drainage issues that negatively impact surrounding properties. The notice included grainy photos that supposedly showed water pooling near my property line. The fine was $1,000 unless I paid for a drainage assessment and any necessary corrections. I stared at the notice in disbelief. The photos were clearly taken during the thaw, when water was pooling everywhere because the ground was still frozen. Every property in the neighborhood had the same issue. This was pure retaliation. I called Marcus again. She's escalating. After reviewing the notice, Marcus sighed. This is harassment at this point. We need to respond more formally. I'm going to draft a cease and desist letter to the HOA, specifically naming Patricia Whitmore for targeted harassment. We'll also file a formal complaint with the board about her conduct. Will that actually work? It'll create a paper trail. If she continues, we can pursue legal action for harassment and abuse of her HOA position. The cease and desist letter went out the next day. It was strongly worded, outlining the pattern of Patricia's behavior and demanding that the drainage fine be rescinded and that all future interactions be documented and reasonable. Marcus sent copies to every board member and to the HOA's management company. The response was not what I expected. 3 days later, I received a call from Donald Pritchard, the board member who had spoken up during the Zoom meeting. Mr. Johnson, this is Donald Pritchard from the HOA board. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Of course, I said cautiously. I want to apologize on behalf of the board. After receiving your attorney's letter, several of us did some digging into Patricia's recent activities as HOA president. What we found is concerning. The drainage fine has been rescinded, and we're conducting a full review of all fines and notices she's issued over the past year. Okay, I said slowly. Can I ask what you found? Donald hesitated. I probably shouldn't share too many details while the review is ongoing, but let's just say you're not the only homeowner who's been on the receiving end of questionable notices and fines. There's a pattern of behavior that suggests personal vendettas rather than legitimate HOA enforcement. So, what happens now? The board is meeting tomorrow to discuss Patricia's position as president. Between you and me, I don't think she's going to be president much longer. But I wanted to call you personally to let you know that your complaint is being taken seriously, and to make sure you understand that the board doesn't support the way you've been treated. After hanging up, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Maybe this nightmare was actually going to end. The next evening, I got a call from Marcus. You're not going to believe this. What? I just got a very interesting call from the HOA's attorney. Apparently, during their review of Patricia's activities, they discovered some financial irregularities. My stomach dropped. What kind of irregularities? The kind where money that should have gone to winter maintenance and other operational expenses was redirected to pet projects without proper board approval or documentation. That fountain you mentioned. It cost almost double what was presented to the board, and the extra money came from the general maintenance fund. Patricia approved the overruns herself without consulting anyone. Is that legal? Not even slightly. The HOA board has a fiduciary responsibility to the homeowners. Misappropriating funds is a serious issue. They're bringing in a forensic accountant to do a full audit. Over the next 2 weeks, the situation unraveled spectacularly. The forensic accountant discovered that Patricia had been systematically diverting HOA funds for almost 18 months. The fountain was just the tip of the iceberg. She had approved inflated contracts for landscaping work done by her brother-in-law's company. She had used HOA money to pay for a new sign at the neighborhood entrance that featured decorative elements she personally selected from a high-end supplier, marking up the costs. She had even charged several personal expenses to the HOA credit card, claiming they were for community events that never actually happened. In total, the accountant estimated that Patricia had misappropriated over $47,000 in HOA funds. The board held another emergency meeting, this time in person at the clubhouse. The room was packed with homeowners who had gotten wind of the scandal. Patricia showed up looking defiant, but that confidence crumbled as the forensic accountant presented his findings. When it was over, Patricia was not only removed as HOA president, but also formally banned from serving in any HOA leadership position. The board voted unanimously to pursue criminal charges for embezzlement and fraud. I watched as Patricia left the meeting, her face pale and drawn. Part of me felt a twinge of sympathy, but then I remembered all the grief she had given me over the gutters, the ridiculous fines, the harassment. She had brought this on herself. A month later, Patricia Whitmore was arrested by the Rochester Police Department on charges of theft by swindle and embezzlement. According to the local news report, if convicted on all counts, she faced up to 10 years in prison and substantial fines. The HOA hired a professional management company to handle day-to-day operations while they reorganized. Donald Pritchard became the interim president, and one of his first acts was to hire a proper winter maintenance contractor to handle the gutters and ice dams for all common buildings. The cost was covered by the remaining HOA funds, and he assured all homeowners that the budget would be properly allocated going forward. As winter turned to spring, the ice finally melted and the neighborhood began to thaw. The association building's gutter was professionally repaired, along with the damaged fascia and other issues that had been neglected. The destroyed bushes were replaced with more practical landscaping that didn't require thousands of dollars of annual maintenance. I was out front planting some flowers one Saturday morning in April when Donald Pritchard walked over from his house 3 doors down. "Mr. Johnson, got a minute?" he called out. "Sure, and please call me Isaac." Donald smiled. "Isaac, then. I wanted to thank you personally. If you hadn't stood up to Patricia and pushed back when she came after you, we might never have looked closely at what she was doing. A lot of homeowners just paid the fines and moved on because it was easier than fighting. Your willingness to challenge her exposed a serious problem." "I was just defending myself," I said honestly. "I didn't expect it to turn into all this." "Well, sometimes standing up for what's right has bigger consequences than we anticipate. The good kind in this case." He paused. "The board would like to reimburse you for your legal expenses." "It's the least we can do." I shook my head. "That's not necessary. I'm just glad it's resolved. The offer stands if you change your mind. Also, we're looking for new board members. You clearly have a good head on your shoulders and you're not afraid to do what's right. Would you be interested?" I thought about it for a moment. Maybe in a year or two. Right now, I think I've had enough HOA drama to last me a while. Donald laughed. "Fair enough. The offer's always open." After he left, I went back to my planting. The sun was warm. The birds were singing. And for the first time since moving into this neighborhood, I felt like I could actually enjoy my home without looking over my shoulder for the next ridiculous notice or fine. The criminal case against Patricia moved forward slowly, as these things do. Her attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor was pushing for jail time given the amount of money involved and the breach of fiduciary duty. I was interviewed twice by investigators, once about the gutter incident and once about the pattern of fines and harassment. Each time, I provided all my documentation, and told them exactly what had happened. In June, I received a subpoena to testify at Patricia's preliminary hearing. I showed up at the Olmsted County Courthouse on a humid Tuesday morning, dressed in my best suit. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, and there were only a handful of people present besides the lawyers and court staff. Patricia sat at the defense table looking diminished somehow, like she had shrunk in on herself. She didn't look at me as I was called to the stand. The prosecutor, a sharp woman in her 40s named Jennifer Hayes, walked me through the timeline of events. I described the demand to clear the HOA gutters, my decision to do my own property first, the collapsed gutter, and the subsequent harassment. And why didn't you just comply with Mrs. Whitmore's initial demand to clear the association building gutters first? She asked. Because it was dangerous work that should have been done by professionals, and because I had a responsibility to protect my own property first, I said. Also, frankly, because the demand didn't make sense. The HOA has substantial funds specifically for building maintenance. There was no legitimate reason to force homeowners to do that work themselves, except that Mrs. Whitmore had apparently spent the maintenance money on other things. Patricia's attorney objected, claiming speculation, but the judge allowed my statement to stand as my personal assessment of the situation at the time. On cross-examination, the defense attorney tried to paint me as someone who had refused to help the community and had been looking for an excuse to cause problems. But I had all my documentation, and my timeline of events was ironclad. I had complied with the demand. I had cleared gutters. I had spent 2 full days doing exactly what was requested. The fact that the HOA buildings were damaged before I got to them wasn't my fault or my responsibility. After I stepped down, the judge heard testimony from the forensic accountant and from Donald Pritchard about the board's investigation. By the end of the day, it was clear that Patricia's case was not going well. 2 weeks later, Patricia's attorney worked out a plea agreement. She pled guilty to 1 count of felony theft by swindle in exchange for the other charges being reduced. The sentence was 3 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 months, plus full restitution of the $47,000 she had misappropriated, and 5 years of probation after her release. Standing in the courtroom for the sentencing hearing, I watched as Patricia tearfully apologized to the court and to the homeowners she had wronged. The judge was not particularly sympathetic. Mrs. Whitmore, you were given a position of trust within your community, and you abused that trust systematically and deliberately, the judge said. You used your authority to harass homeowners who questioned you, and you stole money that your neighbors had paid in good faith for the maintenance and improvement of their community. This court takes such breaches of fiduciary duty very seriously. Patricia was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. Her husband, a quiet man I had seen around the neighborhood but never really spoken to, sat in the gallery with his head in his hands. Outside the courthouse, Jennifer Hayes, the prosecutor, stopped me on the steps. Mr. Johnson, I wanted to thank you for your cooperation throughout this process. Your documentation and testimony were very helpful in establishing the pattern of Mrs. Whitmore's behavior. I'm just glad it's over, I said. Cases like this are important, she continued. HOAs wield a lot of power over people's homes and daily lives. When someone abuses that power, it's essential that there are consequences. You did the right thing by standing up to her. I drove home feeling a strange mix of emotions, relief that it was finally over, satisfaction that justice had been served, but also a lingering sadness at how unnecessarily ugly the whole situation had become. If Patricia had just done her job properly in the first place, none of this would have happened. Back in the neighborhood, life gradually returned to normal. The HOA operated smoothly under professional management. The new board was transparent about finances and decisions, sending out monthly updates and holding quarterly meetings where homeowners could voice concerns. The difference was night and day. My neighbor to the east, a woman named Emma Vasquez, who I had only spoken to a few times before, stopped by one evening in July with a bottle of wine. "I wanted to thank you," she said when I answered the door. "Patricia fined me $600 last year because she claimed my fence was 3 inches too tall. I paid it because I didn't know what else to do, and I was worried she would just keep fining me if I fought back." When everything came out about what she was doing, the board refunded all the questionable fines from the past 2 years. I got my money back because you had the guts to stand up to her. We ended up sitting on my porch for 2 hours, drinking wine and sharing stories about Patricia's various absurd demands and fines. It turned out that at least a dozen homeowners in the neighborhood had similar experiences. Patricia had created an atmosphere of fear and intimidation, and people had just accepted it because fighting back seemed too difficult. The worst part is that she made everyone afraid to be involved in the HOA, Emma said. Nobody wanted to run for the board because they didn't want to deal with her. She had complete control because the rest of us just checked out. "That's changing now, though," I said. "Donald told me they got a bunch of volunteers for the next board election." "Including me," Emma said with a smile. "I'm running for treasurer. I figure after all this, we need people who will actually pay attention to where the money goes." As summer stretched on, the neighborhood felt different. People were outside more, talking to each other, organizing block parties and community events. It was like Patricia's removal had lifted a cloud that nobody had fully realized was there. In August, the HOA held its annual meeting to elect new board members. The turnout was triple what it had been in previous years. Emma was elected treasurer by a wide margin. 2 other new members joined the board, both of them homeowners who were committed to transparency and actual community building rather than petty enforcement of arbitrary rules. During the meeting, Donald Pritchard announced that the HOA had recovered about $30,000 of the stolen funds through the sale of some items Patricia had purchased, including the expensive decorative elements from the entrance sign that were removed and replaced with simpler, more appropriate alternatives. The fountain, unfortunately, was a sunk cost, but the new board voted to convert it into a planter area that would require minimal maintenance. "We're also proposing some changes to the HOA covenants," Donald announced. "Specifically, we want to add stronger oversight requirements for anyone in a leadership position, mandatory financial audits every year, and term limits for board positions. No more multi-year presidencies where one person can accumulate too much unchecked power." The changes passed unanimously. As I drove home from that meeting, I reflected on how much had changed since that freezing February morning when Patricia had demanded I clear the HOA gutters. What had started as a simple act of malicious compliance had snowballed into exposing corruption, criminal charges, and ultimately, positive reform for the entire community. I never set out to be a hero or a whistleblower. I just wanted to be left alone to live in my house without constant harassment. But sometimes, standing up for yourself has ripple effects you never could have anticipated. The following winter was completely different. The HOA hired a professional service to handle snow removal and ice dam prevention for all common buildings. They sent out informational emails to homeowners about how to prevent ice dams on personal property and offered a list of recommended contractors. There were no demands, no threats, no fines for people who didn't comply with arbitrary standards. I still cleared my own gutters, of course, but I did it on my schedule, using proper safety equipment and without some petty tyrant breathing down my neck about doing her job for her. In February, almost exactly a year after the gutter incident, I was out salting my driveway when Donald walked over, bundled up against the cold. "Glad to see you're taking care of your property," he said with a grin. "But don't worry, nobody's going to demand you do the HOA buildings too." I laughed. "I appreciate that. How's everything going with the board?" "Really well, actually. Emma's doing a great job as treasurer. We're running a surplus for the first time in 3 years because we're actually sticking to the budget and not spending money on nonsense. We're planning to resurface the community pool deck this spring and still have money left over for a reserve fund." "That's fantastic." Donald looked at the association building, where the gutters hung clean and clear of ice. "Professional maintenance costs more upfront, but it's worth it. No damaged buildings, no liability issues, no forcing homeowners to risk their necks. Funny how doing things the right way actually works out better in the end." "Revolutionary concept," I said dryly. We stood there for a moment in the cold, watching our breath form clouds in the winter air. "You ever hear anything about Patricia?" I asked. Donald nodded. "Last I heard, she's doing her time at the Women's Correctional Facility in Shakopee. Her husband divorced her and moved out of the neighborhood last fall. Their house sold in October. I heard she's working in the prison library, helping other inmates prepare for their GED exams." "Huh," I said. It was a strange image, Patricia teaching people instead of terrorizing them. "Maybe she'll learn something from all this." "Maybe," Donald said, though he sounded skeptical. "Either way, she won't be terrorizing any more HOAs." After he left, I finished salting my driveway and went inside to warm up. I made a cup of coffee and sat by the window, looking out at the snow-covered neighborhood. My roof was solid, my gutters were clear, and my HOA wasn't run by a corrupt tyrant anymore. All because I had decided to follow instructions exactly as written instead of letting myself be pushed around. The legal principle of malicious compliance had served me well. Patricia had demanded I clear gutters, and I had done exactly that. Just my gutters, not hers. And that simple act of standing up for myself had exposed a pattern of abuse and corruption that had been hurting the entire community. Spring came early that year. By March, the snow was melting and the first green shoots were pushing up through the softening ground. The neighborhood came alive with people working in their yards, kids riding bikes, neighbors chatting across property lines. I was planting tulip bulbs along my front walk when Emma stopped by, jogging in place to keep her heart rate up. "Looking good, Isaac," she called out. "Thanks. How's the treasurer job treating you?" "It's actually fun," she said. "When you're working with people who actually care about the community instead of their own ego, it makes all the difference. We're planning a neighborhood barbecue in May. You should come." "I'll be there," I said. She jogged off, and I went back to my planting. The tulips would bloom in a few weeks, adding color and life to the front of my house. My house, that I owned in my neighborhood, that finally felt like an actual community instead of a dictatorship. That evening, I got an email from Marcus, my lawyer friend who had helped me through the whole ordeal. Saw the news that Whitmore's appeal was denied. Looks like she'll be serving her full sentence. Thought you'd want to know it's really, truly over. By the way, you should see the business I've gotten from your case. Apparently, word got around that I help homeowners deal with HOA overreach, and I've had 6 new clients in the past 3 months. So thanks for the referrals, even if they were unintentional. I wrote back thanking him for all his help and joking that I should charge him a finder's fee. His response was immediate. "Your payment was watching Whitmore get arrested. That was worth more than money. He had a point. Over the next few months, I settled into a comfortable routine. I went to work at the engineering firm where I designed HVAC systems for commercial buildings. I came home and worked in my yard. I attended HOA meetings when there was something important to discuss, but mostly I just enjoyed living in my house without drama. The neighborhood barbecue in May was a huge success. Over 100 people showed up, including several families I had never met before. There was food, games for the kids, and a general atmosphere of people actually enjoying each other's company. Donald gave a short speech thanking everyone for their patience during the difficult transition year and praising the community for coming together. "Last year was tough," he said. "We had to confront some hard truths about how our HOA was being run. But we did it, and we came out stronger on the other side. This neighborhood is proof that when good people stand up for what's right, positive change is possible." There was applause, and I found myself getting a few grateful looks from people who knew my role and how everything had unfolded. It was a strange feeling, being seen as some kind of community hero when I had really just been trying to avoid doing someone else's work. As the sun set and the barbecue wound down, I helped Donald pack up the leftover food and folding tables. "This was great," I said. "We should do it more often." "That's the plan. Emma wants to organize something every other month, build real community bonds, make this a place people actually want to live, not just a place they're stuck living. That's a good goal." Donald paused in folding a table and looked at me seriously. "Isaac, I know you don't want to join the board right now, but I hope you'll reconsider eventually. We need people like you, people who aren't afraid to stand up when something's wrong." "I'll think about it," I said honestly, "but not quite yet. I'm still enjoying just being a regular homeowner for a while," he laughed. "Fair enough. The offer stands whenever you're ready." Summer passed peacefully. I worked on my house, fixing small things that had been bothering me, repainting the deck, updating some fixtures. It felt good to invest time and energy in my home without worrying that someone would fine me for some imagined violation. In September, I got a letter from the Minnesota Department of Corrections. It was from Patricia Whitmore. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it carefully, half expecting it to be full of blame and vitriol. Instead, it was an apology. "Dear Mr. Johnson," it began. "I know this letter may not be welcome, and I would understand if you choose not to read it. But I wanted you to know that I am truly sorry for how I treated you and many others in our neighborhood. I have had a lot of time to think about my actions and the harm I caused. My therapist here has helped me understand that I was using my position in the HOA to feel important and powerful because I felt powerless in other areas of my life. That doesn't excuse what I did, but it helps me understand it. I stole money that belonged to the community. I harassed people for petty reasons. I abused the trust that my neighbors placed in me. I am ashamed of all of it. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I recognize the damage I caused, and I am working every day to become a better person. I hope the neighborhood is doing well without me. Sincerely, Patricia Whitmore." I read the letter 3 times, trying to decide how I felt about it. Finally, I folded it up and put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I would respond, maybe I wouldn't, but it was something at least. An acknowledgement of wrongdoing. A tiny step toward accountability. That evening, I sat on my back deck with a beer, watching the sun set behind the trees at the edge of the neighborhood. The air was warm, crickets were chirping, and somewhere down the street I could hear kids laughing as they played in a yard. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Board meeting next Tuesday. We're voting on the budget for next year. Come if you can. We could use more regular homeowners attending." I texted back that I would be there. 2 years ago, I would have avoided HOA meetings like the plague. They were boring at best, infuriating at worst. But now, with actual reasonable people running things, they were almost interesting. It felt good to be part of a community that actually functioned like a community. The Tuesday meeting was well attended. The proposed budget was reasonable and transparent, allocating funds appropriately for maintenance, improvements, and reserves. There was a brief discussion about replacing some aging playground equipment in the common area, and the board presented 3 options with cost analyses for each. People asked questions. The board answered them honestly, and eventually the budget passed with only minor modifications. The whole meeting took less than an hour. As people filed out, Emma caught my arm. "Hey, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "How did you know? When Patricia came after you about the gutters, how did you know to stand your ground instead of just going along with it?" I thought about it for a moment. I guess because something about it felt wrong from the start. Not just wrong like inconvenient, but wrong like abusive. She wasn't asking me to help the community. She was demanding I do work that professionals should do, work that the HOA had plenty of money to pay for. And when I started asking questions, she got aggressive instead of explaining. That's when I knew something was off. Emma nodded slowly. I wish I had realized that sooner. I just kept paying her fines and following her ridiculous rules because I thought that's what you were supposed to do in an HOA. "A lot of people think that," I said. "That's how people like Patricia get away with what they do. They count on everyone being too tired or too scared to push back." "Well, I'm glad you pushed back. We all are." I drove home feeling good. The neighborhood had come a long way in less than 2 years, from a place run by a petty tyrant to an actual community where people looked out for each other and made decisions together. All because I had refused to clear someone else's gutters. The following winter was the mildest anyone could remember. We got snow, but not the brutal, week-long deep freezes that caused ice dam problems. The HOA's maintenance contractor kept all the common buildings in good shape, and homeowners took care of their own properties without any drama. In February, on the 2-year anniversary of the gutter incident, Donald organized a small get-together at his house. It was just a handful of people, the current board members and a few homeowners who had been particularly involved in the community renaissance. "I wanted to mark this occasion," Donald said, raising a glass of wine. 2 years ago, our neighborhood was in trouble. We had corruption at the top, intimidation keeping people in line, and nobody willing to speak up because it seemed too hard. One person standing up for what was right changed everything. So here's to Isaac, and to the principle that sometimes the best thing you can do is refuse to go along with something that's wrong. Everyone raised their glasses, and I felt my face flush with embarrassment. "I just didn't want to clear the damn gutters," I protested. "Exactly," Donald said with a grin. "You didn't want to do something unreasonable and potentially dangerous, so you didn't. That simple act of self-preservation exposed everything else. Sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is just stand up for yourself." We spent the rest of the evening talking and laughing, sharing stories about the neighborhood and making plans for the spring. It felt like being with friends, not just neighbors I happened to live near. When I got home that night, I looked at my house with genuine affection. The gutters were clear and in good repair. The paint was fresh. The yard was well maintained. Everything was exactly how I wanted it, with no fear of some arbitrary fine or demand from a power-hungry HOA president. I had stood my ground, cleared my own gutters, and let Patricia's gutters tear themselves off the roof. That simple act of malicious compliance had led to justice, reform, and ultimately, a better community for everyone. Sometimes the best way to serve your community is to refuse to be bullied into serving someone's ego. The legal system had worked. Patricia had been held accountable for her crimes. The HOA had been reformed with proper oversight and transparency. And I had learned that standing up for yourself, even in small ways, can have impacts far beyond what you initially imagine. 3 years after that winter morning when Patricia had demanded I clear the HOA gutters, I finally joined the board. Not as president, just as a regular member. I figured it was time to give back to the community that had rallied around me when I needed support. My first board meeting was in May, held in the clubhouse that now had properly maintained gutters and a freshly painted interior. The agenda included discussions about landscaping contracts, pool maintenance schedules, and a proposal to install electric vehicle charging stations in the common parking area. It was boring, bureaucratic work. It was also important work that affected people's daily lives and their largest investment, their homes. As I sat there reviewing budget spreadsheets and maintenance contracts, I thought about how different this was from the way Patricia had run things. Transparency instead of secrecy. Collaboration instead of intimidation. Service instead of power trips. The neighborhood had healed, and I had been a small part of that healing. Not because I had planned some grand gesture or because I was particularly brave. Just because when someone had made an unreasonable demand, I had said no and stood by that decision. Sometimes that's all it takes to change everything.